G'day and welcome to the first public playtest of the Survival Update. As someone who absolutely loves survival and loves everything about having to engineer solutions, the way they've done this survival update, at least from what I've played so far, I am really loving it. I love that things are more difficult because these drop pods are so tiny and barely provide you any resources. I love the survival kit for the fact that you have to drill a whole bunch of stone and figure out a way to drill that stone more efficiently because it's just so painful to do it by hand. Like many of you know, I don't play with build and repair and I don't play with nanites because I like to try and engineer my way around the problems that they avoid. I know many people do like them, and I'm glad that Space Engineers allows us to play the game we like to play, but I love that they've introduced this setup and allowing us to play the game this way because it's the type of thing that I love to do. And just to prove that, I'm going to go with a hard start. I'm going to go with Titan. Let's have a look. I was going to do a whole bunch of testing in this update to see what each of the blocks actually did and how they work and try and really tease them out, but Keen are probably going to change a whole lot about all of these blocks before the proper release comes. So what I'm going to actually do is play through this a bit and maybe do a little bit of light testing, but we'll save the proper testing for when the thing properly comes out, because that way the testing will actually be relevant and hopefully won't be wrong. Now you can see the new survival pod, and this thing's the same on all of the planets. Even if you're on some moons that you can't use the thrusters on, you will still have atmospheric thrusters. And on the moon, specifically the Earth's moon type moon, you will get a rover with wheels and a cockpit and a few extra bits and pieces, because without atmosphere, the parachute on top would not have worked. So they needed a workaround for that. Now I was hoping that we would land somewhere with a view of the alien planet. Sadly, that's not the case. But I think what I might do is aim for relocation as my first thing to do. So I'll try and get around... Wait, I'm on Titan, aren't I? Get around Titan so that I can get that view that I'm after. Since I might be playing for a little while, so I'd like to have a nice view. On this survival pod are a few things that are new. The first one is this survival kit, which you can see I can get at here. I shouldn't need this atmospheric thruster. Let's grind it down. Let's grind away a few of these blocks so that we can see it a bit more clearly. There we go. So now we can see our survival kit, and we can see the medical symbol because it is a sort of mini med bay. So I can recharge, I can refuel my hydrogen, my oxygen, and I can even respawn here. Now this is something that's interesting. Notice the difference in size between the O2 generator's inventory and mine. This is on times 3. Times 3 with 1200 litres. I left everything at default. I didn't change any of the settings compared to what Keen had decided would be what we'd test. And this is what they've given us. They've actually given us the larger personal inventory that a lot of people had wanted. And I'm pretty sure I was included in that. It is nice to have a bit of a bigger player inventory, and I like the fact that some of the block inventories are now smaller. Because that just, I don't know, it gives you a push to engineer. Like I was saying at the start, I like having a push to engineer. And the slowness with which this survival kit can make stuff. And yes, that's right, it's a med bay and it can make stuff, because we go to production here and we'll see we can turn stone into gravel and ingots. So let's go collect some stone. And now that we've got some stone, we can take it around and we can pop it in our survival kit. And with our survival kit, we can then click on this button that produces ingots from the stone. It's not going to work in the same way that the refinery traditionally did. For this one, you actually have to order it up like it's an assembler. It'll then take those 500 units of stone and turn it into 6 kilos of gravel, 11 kilos of iron, a kilo of nickel, and 1.5 kilos of silicon. That's not a lot. It seems like it would be, but it's actually really not. Mining by hand to produce enough iron to build a few steel plates is a horrendously slow experience. So if we go to our basic components that this thing can also produce and have a look at how much our steel plate's going to cost, it's 20 iron. We need 1,000 stone for every single steel plate. In my personal inventory, I can carry, if I go into my seat here and we use the seat inventory, I can probably end up getting myself in a situation where I can hold maybe 2.5 to 3,000. So that's 5 to 6 times this much output. That doesn't go very far. So it really encourages you to come up with a way to get some ship drills or to get a collector that you can kind of run up a hill and just run all this stuff into. And I think that's the way I'm going to go because it seems kind of fun. They've made some very cool changes to the production window. First of all, we've got a search bar, so we can, when we go to our bigger and better assemblers that can do more stuff, and if you've got mods that add components and things, you can actually just search for them. We can search for steel plate and just find it. It's so much better. Hopefully when we get to the assembler window where we've actually got a proper assembler, we can actually then just search for blocks and order up all the components for a block that we want to produce, which is great. Another really nice change is if we queue up a whole bunch of ingots to be refined, and I like to do this because as soon as it runs out of stone, if I then just go collect some more, it'll keep processing it every time I just drop it in. So I don't have to jump back into the menu. I can just keep dropping more stone in and it'll keep refining it, much like a standard refinery would. So we don't have to interact with it. Now, if this was prior to the update, we'd have a really annoying thing where every time we would have to rearrange the queue. Because if we wanted to produce some steel plate, we wouldn't be able to because the refining of the stone would be at the top of the list. However, that's not the case anymore. If we want to, say, produce, let's make 30 girders. It's producing the second item in the queue. How is that a thing? That is so cool. Now, if you've run out of the materials that you need for the first item in a queue, or the second, it'll just keep moving down the queue and producing the next one in the queue. This is such a nice convenience. This is such a good change that I'd never thought needed to be made, but I am so grateful it has been made. It makes interacting with that survival kit so much better. I'm sure some of you guys had thought of that as being a nice feature. It was just one of those things that I just had learned to live with so much that I'd forgotten that there might be a better way of doing things. There might be a better way for me to go about having my existence. And you can see why I queue up a huge thing. I just drop that in and it immediately gets processed. We want to move so we've got a view of the alien planet. That means we're going to need to put a gyroscope and a remote control on this ship. We're not going to be able to make a cockpit very easily, so I think those two are the best way to go. So, old school, we'd go into our G menu and we'd go right click on the gyroscope. Come on. And we can't, because now everything is locked behind a progression queue. Now, this progression tree or queue or whatever you want to call it is optional. It is a game setting option. We cannot have it. It's a nice touch for... I don't know. I'm a bit torn on it at the moment, to be honest. I think the way that it's holding some of the blocks back makes sense, but some of the other ways it's held back really doesn't. So if I want to build a gyroscope and I want to build a remote control, I need to build a landing gear. So I think the easiest way to get a landing gear is to grind this one down, and I wonder if something that's already placed when I weld it back up will fill the criteria. It does. So there you go. That's a nice easy way to do the landing gear one, and now I have access to remote controls. Now, in order to get access to gyroscopes, I need to build a remote control. How convenient. With the front of the pod cleared out, we can get at some of these other blocks in here. So we can do the same thing to them as we did with the landing gear, right? How about with the beacon? If we grind it down, shouldn't we just be able to weld it up and then that'll count as achieving that? I can't weld it. I can't even put those components I'm now holding, oops, wrong menu, back into the beacon. Oops. So don't grind down stuff that isn't already an option for you to build because it won't unlock it for you. You need to go through it stepwise and actually do stuff that you can already build and build those things if you need to unlock it. So the landing gear worked because I already had it as an option of something I could build. The rest of this stuff won't. So if I ground down any of these small curved conveyors, they're not going to work either. This small cargo container will though, because I have it as a build option. So if I ground it down, weld it back up, I've now unlocked whatever it unlocked, which is the small conveyor tube. So you can kind of just go through this as a little bit of a quick tree to unlock a few things if you want to play with some of the unlocking mechanics in place. And you can relatively quickly unlock the blocks you need. There we go. Gyroscope done. One of the things I should point out about the gyroscope is that it needs a large steel tube, which we can't make from the survival constructor. It has only limited options and none of them include large steel tubes, nor are there small steel tubes. So anything requiring either of those, you're going to have to ransack various components on board the ship to be able to use it, or to be able to build it. And that can be a bit tricky with some things. So I've now got a remote control, which means I can fly this thing. It is going to be wonky as anything to fly because it's only got thrusters in the up direction. One of the really nice touches about this drop pod is that it's not only got atmospheric thrusters, but it's actually got a little hydrogen thruster on the bottom, which means it'll be able to work anywhere. And I'm going to use it to fly this thing. I'm not actually going to use those atmospheric thrusters that are on the outside. So there we go. We're flying our drop pod. And I'm hoping that I don't run out of ice because I didn't build another parachute because I can't. On the Earth-like planet, I tested this with the 4 atmospheric thrusters and it was able to lift it just with those. I haven't tested on the alien planet, but I think there was enough thrust that it should work there too. So where you want to, you can get away with using the atmospherics, which will last a lot longer than trying to use the hydrogen under most circumstances. I feel like I may have reached escape velocity unintentionally. So there you go. If you're on a moon, you can easily get to space just by loading up your O2 gen with ice and turning on your hydrogen thruster. So I've just gone and changed one thing from the default settings, and that's to allow me to have spectator cam. Because I want to show off something that has changed in the game that I think is a really, really nicely done change. And that is that the Earth-like foliage is a lot nicer. Let's get down here to tree level. Oh, here we go. They do pop in quite badly, but man, these trees are so much better than the last trees we had. I really like them. There's so much more variability to them. They hang around in little clumps like this. I really, really, really like this change. It is something that, as someone who enjoys the beauty of Space Engineers as it's been throughout all of its development, and it's just kept getting prettier and prettier, any little change like this is obviously going to be right up my alley. Like, look at these pine trees. So pretty. Wait, have they even got pine cones? They do have pine cones. They're 2-dimensional pine cones, but they're still pine cones. Cool. I wonder if the alien planet has similarly changed vegetation. Okay, these look to be about the same as what they did before. So they haven't updated the alien foliage yet because they all look identical, but maybe that's something that they'll do in the future. Either way, it makes for a beautiful backdrop. Another thing that's apparently been improved, I haven't witnessed the bug yet, is that bug where you would get voxel LODs remaining when you get back to where you'd been, particularly when using spectator cam like I just did, traveling from one place to another all over the shop. That was something that was a particularly big problem for the LODs before, but it seems to be better. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, back to surviving. I am not going to go get that unknown signal that is on the other side of the moon. I am going to start building a bit of a base. I'm pretty happy with my situation right now, but I need to have some more advanced refining built, which means I'm going to need to be able to build a, where is it? Basic assembler over here. And I'm also going to need to build a basic refinery, or what we used to think of as the arc furnace. So to build both of those and to build a little bit of a base with some power source, I'm going to need to collect a fair bit of rock. And there's a few ways we can collect rock. We can do it by hand like I was doing before, and I don't want to do that. Or we can use ship drills and we can just drill into the ground. Or we could use a collector and we could trundle stuff down a hill into the collector. I kind of like that idea just for the fun of it. And so my plan is to grab a little bit of stuff from here and then build a nice little slope to dump rock into using my hand drill. Rust freighter. Ooh, that's a new encounter. Now, I don't want to look too closely, but I want to get a bit of a look. That is definitely new. Apparently, it's not just the design of some of the cargo ships that's new. There's supposed to be some new NPC behaviors that are coming out with this patch. I haven't had the opportunity to witness any of those yet, but fingers crossed I'll be able to at some point soon, because I'm really excited about that side of things and excited about what people like Lucas might be able to do with them once they're available. Alrighty, enough distractions. Let's get on to surviving. We need to have something relatively close to the bottom of that slope, and we need to then put a windmill on it. And there we go. We have a wind turbine. So the wind turbine will actually spin faster if it's getting more wind. The wind that is present is only present in the universe that the wind turbine actually exists in. There are no forces that will buffet your ships around. There's no forces that will buffet you around. There are no weather systems. But the way this seems to work is by distance off the ground. If we quickly save and go to another world that I've set up some tests in, I can show you a few things about the block that I've discovered already. So here we go. Here's a little weird construction I put together. We've got a wind turbine at basically sea level, and then we've got one going up 2.5 meters each step of the way. These were built in sequence, so if we go into the control panel, we can actually see them all in order. If this is a distance from the voxel material sort of calculation, we should see a nice progression going from one end to the other. That's not actually what we see. We've got wind turbine 1 with a maximum output of 191 kilowatts. Number 2 with 169. So the one that's on the ground has slightly more than the one just off the ground. Then the next one goes up again. Then this is kind of more feeling like it's got a nice neat progression. Everything's working. We're still increasing, and then we're basically the same with these two. Basically the same again. Then we get another jump up. And then we start going down. And then we go up again. And then we go up again. So I don't know why there's that little drop in the middle. Since I've kept these far enough away from each other that they shouldn't be impacting each other's wind speed, as other blocks will actually do that. And I can show you that in another test I set up. Obviously these tests are going to need to be done properly in the future, but for now, this works as a bit of a rough guide of what to expect. Now what I've got here is a wind turbine that is completely blocked by the blocks around it. It is unable to spin. This block, for some reason, doesn't block anything. And this one doesn't either. Yet, oddly, if I take out this one, the thing will start spinning. Put it back, it stops. Take it out, it comes back. So it's not the same from all sides. On one side, any of these 3 blocks can be clear to allow it to spin. But on the rest of them, it's only these 2. And the blocks above are irrelevant, as are these ones down below, at least from my initial testing. So if I remove any of these yellow blocks, it should start spinning and replace them, and it'll stop again. So that contraption I'd set up before did not have any of these blocks in the way. I'll have to test later how far out you can go where it still blocks it, and how large a room you'd need to have one working indoors. Because, that'll be fun. And I also want to check about how they might work underground, how they might work up in the air. And the last thing I want to check before we go back to our other survival scenario, is if we go Control C, we crash the game. Whoops. Seems like there's a consistent crash with that one, as that's the second time that's happened. So, note to self, don't copy large objects. It seems to continuously crash the game. So that little crash that we experienced is another reason I haven't gone into the testing very hard. If I'm not able to copy and paste grids very easily, then it's going to be a nightmare to set up a lot of the tests that I would normally set up. Because what I was going to do was copy and paste that little turbine setup onto a mountaintop and see if we had different outputs. But I will leave, as I said, all that testing for a later date. So the wind turbine is outputting 299 kilowatts. That's not too bad. That'll be enough for what we need for the moment. Now, we do want a basic assembler right away. That's the first thing we want to construct on this new base, because that'll be able to then put together the small steel tubes that we need to build the collector so that I can start dumping rock down in here. Now that we've got our basic assembler, we can actually make some more useful components. So we can make things like small steel tubes and battery power cells and all that sort of stuff. So that we should be able to get things going if we can get enough resources into the thing. Now I reckon I orientated it wrong though. Don't need those extra steel plates in there, and every steel plate matters now. So then I can put our basic refinery in front of it like so. What I could possibly do is put our collector facing out like that, so that so that I can kind of create a bit of a channel in the stone as well that leads to it, not just block channels. That could work quite nicely. So we need 10 large steel tubes, and that's why we build the assembler first, because you need it to be able to get them. So I need some large steel tubes, and even though I've got the basic assembler, I'm still not going to get them. The reason for that, if we go to our control panel, is the basic assembler requires 560 kilowatts of input, and our wind turbine is only putting out 299. Without a battery to buffer some of the wind turbine's output, this assembler is not going to work. So I actually need to get a second wind turbine for this to even function. All right, let's see if this assembler can work now. So now it says missing items. So let's go grab the iron that we've got in the survival kit over here. There we go. Now we're getting our large steel tubes. This is about the first time I've ever legitimately used the right click to dump stuff into a construction on the welder. I so rarely use it, but right now, so that I can see how much I've got and still access the inventory on this basic assembler, it's really quite convenient. I just got my energy low warning, something that I've usually ignored, but there's another thing that's been added in the survival update, which is down on my bottom of my HUD, where I've got O2 none, and then I've got freeze. That's because if I run out of power, that's exactly what's going to happen to me. It is so cold here that if I run out of power, my suit will no longer be able to warm me, and I will freeze to death. So finally, when we run out of power, we will actually die. I know that's not something I should necessarily be quite so excited about, but it really is. Having flown back from the moon to the Earth with no power and landed happily with no problems, I was actually really disappointed that that was the outcome. I kind of wanted to die from that. I think it was a bit sad that it was just kind of a, oh well, nothing happened, cool. I really am happy that finally there's a reason for making sure your suit is powered, or making sure you've got a pressurized compartment. So pressurized compartments will also maintain a perfect temperature that you need to survive, so that you don't need to worry about keeping yourself warm if you're inside a pressurized space. So it gives another reason to build a pressurized space. I never really needed a reason, I just kind of liked the idea of doing it. Even before pressurization was a thing, I always built my spaces so they looked like they were pressurized, or at least pressurizable. So for me, it wasn't really something that was absolutely necessary, but I'm so happy that it's actually a legitimate need, and there's a genuine benefit from it now too. What do I need for this collector? Let's go to our assembler and find out. Production. Basic. Oh no! There's no block option in the basic assembler. Now I'm just going to quickly cheat something because I want to see if there's still the block option in the advanced assembler. And I'll also show you something that's unfortunate about jumping into creative. I now lose my progression tree. The moment I jump into creative, I lose it. And I don't think I get it back. But I'm not that worried. Production. It does have the block queue. Good. So we can search, and I could have gone collector. And there we go. So that's another benefit of the advanced assembler. So let's go back. Let's turn off our creative mode tools. Go to our G menu. Oh no! Yes! Our unlocks stay. Cool. I was worried they'd go away, but they don't. Haha. Excellent. I am pleased. Now, one of the things I was wondering was if the basic refinery will also do the same trick with stone. It does. But since I now am, not totally restricted on only refining stone, I could actually go out and find some iron. I could refine something properly to get the good stuff. But it's nighttime, so I'm not going to go do that just yet. Oh no! Okay, here we go. Here's the no energy. I am dying. Ow. Ow. So until I get some energy back, I am going to just keep dying. There we go. Energy back. Getting my health back. Survival kit works. I'm so glad that came up. I was wanting to do that. I was really wanting to die. I was tempted to let myself die to show the new respawn mechanics, which are the last or nearest medbay that you have. The last one you used, or the nearest one you have, is the one you're going to spawn at. So no more spawn teleporting. That makes me happy. That makes me unreasonably happy. Let's see if this works. Okay, we got some rock coming down. It's going in. Yeah. It's totally unnecessary. I could very easily do this probably a more efficient way, but it is fun. I'm interested in playing around with the stone degradation, the stone refining mechanics, to get a bit of a better feel for how inefficient it might be, and whether there might possibly be some purpose for it in the later game when you've got things pretty well set up. Do we still need to go hunting for other resources or resources? I can't talk today. Do we need to still go hunting for other resources, or can we simply just strip mine dirt and produce most of what we need? And I intend to get a bit of a feel for that this time. So let's see if this is all going to work a bit better now. We've got that collector where I had intended it to be. So it's a bit tumbling down the hill. Let's have a look. Definitely this would be more effective if I was using steel plate, because it wouldn't have little bumps like that one there. But it's definitely working. Probably need an ejector for the gravel, but this totally works. Not anywhere near as efficient as having a drill, but it might get us the stuff we need so that we can build a drill. Since we've got an okay amount of resources, we might be able to go and make a battery on this thing. We could go with your standard large grid battery, which is going to need 120 power cells, which is going to take us forever to collect the materials for. Or we can go for a small grid battery on a rotor. Or, to make it even easier, we could go for one of these tiny new small grid small batteries, since they only need 2 power cells. They don't hold much charge though. I think we can probably have a look if I just place one on there. And we have a look. Small battery. So here we go. It'll start with 2.5 kilowatts of stored power. Really? Is that all? With a maximum stored power of 50 kilowatt hours. If we compare that to our normal battery of 1.08 megawatt hours, it's not really going to be useful for something as large as the base. So I'm not going to be putting it on the end of a rotor, but I think I'll put a normal small ship battery on there. I mean, we can always add both, really. Something I didn't point out about these windmills that I'm just thinking of because I'm building with rotors. The windmills have to be, I'm going to keep calling them windmills even though they're wind generators or whatever they've called them. They have to be on a static grid. They can't be on a subgrid, and they can't be on a ship at all. They can be, they just don't work. They have to be on a static grid to work. So, something to keep in mind. And there we go, got a battery on the base. So that's going to be really helpful because those wind turbines should start charging it when I'm not using the refinery and assembler, which means when I do go to use both of them at the same time, I will hopefully have some charge. Fully recharged in 1 hour. Perfect. I think with that done, it's time for us to move our survival kit onto the base and off the little landing pod. The survival kit is an interesting block. Most blocks in Space Engineers, the large grid version, is very different in terms of requirements than the small grid. The survival kit, however, it's pretty much the same. It just needs a few more steel plate on the large grid version. Something I was just thinking about is for me to build this cargo container down here, I needed to have 4 metal grids. Now, there are a grand total of 8 metal grids on this lander. There are 4 in the atmospheric thrusters, and there are 4 in the hydrogen thruster on the bottom. So if you're struggling to find some, you can always go and grab some from there if that's going to cover what you need. Just something to keep in mind if you're trying to build something early on that needs a few grids and you just barely don't have enough and you haven't managed to find any cobalt yet. These turbines, they're reasonably effective. They're producing energy throughout the whole day quite nicely, but I want something that's going to be a little more effective, something that I can just whack some fuel in and it's going to produce energy. Which isn't going to be a reactor, because we're not going to be able to get uranium. At least, I think I'm not going to be able to. From what I understand, the only places that you're going to be able to find uranium is in the asteroids. So we would have to get off this moon, which we already know we can do quite easily, and go find some in an asteroid. However, there's another option available to us now. And that's one of the ones that's been teased in the videos before this playtest was made live. And that is a hydrogen generator. So I'm going to build one of them so that we can charge that battery up much, much faster. Alrighty, and we've got our hydrogen engine up. Now, we can't actually access it, so we can't just dump ice in it. It needs to be fed hydrogen. So it should work if I pop the conveyor tube in here, because we should be able to pipe hydrogen from our O2H2 generator through our survival kit and into this thing. Let's see if it actually does though. As far as I understand it, this should work because the O2H2 generator should be producing stuff, but we're not getting anything. Why is that? Alrighty, can we turn off the grid? Okay, we can. And this shows off another thing, which is that this LCD that's on this control seat now actually shows an offline when it's without power. However, it's not an actual LCD. We can't write data to it. While it looks like one, it isn't actually one, which is a bit sad. Oh, now you're showing green. Now you're on. We just needed a grid restart. I didn't need to do the whole building of the hydrogen tank, I bet. But it's working now, which means if we go to the battery, it should be charging at maximum rate. Current input, 4.32 megawatts. And if we go to our hydrogen engine, current output, 0. So that's not even all of what's in this update. There is plenty more to be looked at. There's the scenarios, there's the tutorials, there's all manner of other things that I want to look at. I would love you guys to tell me what things you'd like to have looked at in the next playtest. Let me know in the comments. I really want to get in and have a crack at some of those scenarios next time. And maybe even have a look at the tutorial just out of interest. So there's all that and plenty more to come. And I will see you then.